Welcome to Therapy Unplugged, the podcast where two therapists offer insights to the real-life issues we all experience. We are your hosts, Sarah Benoit and Megan McCullough. Welcome back, listeners. Sarah here. In our last episode, Megan and I explored the topic of burnout. And one of the most common areas that I think people experience burnout is in the workplace. This is also where many people have difficulty setting boundaries. And in general, I think setting boundaries can be difficult for a lot of people, but in the workplace, it can be even harder. And I think that's because of the financial ties and the implied or spelled out expectations. And I think it's one thing if you have an hourly job where you can, maybe literally go home at the end of your shift and the day is done. When you have a salaried position or are on a career path, it's not uncommon for people to overwork. And if you couple that with the fact that we can pretty much access work 24/7 if we want to. If you think about the technology that we have in place right now, we live in a global marketplace. And so being able to access things 24/7 can really be a slippery slope. And this is where setting boundaries really can be key. If we think about what boundaries are, so boundaries are limits that remind ourselves and others of what we are and are not willing to do and how we are and are not willing to be treated. So, for example, I've collaborated with people in the past that have worked well into the wee hours of the morning. It would not be unusual for me to receive emails from, say, 10:30 at night until about 2 in the morning. And mind you, this was not a global company that I'm thinking about at the time. And it wasn't even bi-coastal. So I had made it very clear that no one, you can send me emails anytime, day or night, doesn't matter. But you're not going to be getting a response from me until at least 7:30 in the morning, which is when I would get into the office. And if it was a weekend or I was on vacation, they definitely wouldn't be hearing from me. So when we think of boundaries, it's something that you are in control of. And I think when you feel more in control, you may experience more enthusiasm for what you do. You may feel more grounded in your work. You may feel more equipped to navigate challenges and stressors, especially when they come up. And I think overall, you may end up with a greater sense of self-respect. So, what are some ideas to help you set boundaries in the workplace? Now, as I list these off, yes, I have them numbered, but this is not in any particular order at all. And it's really, I think it's about starting small and building on that and where you feel comfortable. So, the one thing I've already mentioned is accessibility. And, don't check your emails and your voicemails on weekends and vacations. Now, I think if on call is part of your job and part of the job expectation, then something like, voicemails on weekends is obviously you've got to do what you've got to do. Another idea is setting a start time and an end time to your workday and sticking to it as best you can. Yes, things are going to come up, but really try to let that be the exception where you can. Take a lunch break. Now, I think you've probably heard me say that is not something that I'm good at, and it's really not something that I necessarily work into my schedule. But I also don't work a typical 9 to 5, 5 days a week. If I did that, I would probably be incorporating at least, maybe not an hour, but at least a half-hour lunch break into my day. Next one, delegate where you can. If you are in a position where you can ask people to help you out and have some people take things off your plate, that's great. Okay, the next one. This is kind of an interesting one. Change your own behavior. So, I think the easiest way is to kind of give you an example. So, going back to that idea maybe of taking a lunch break. So, for example, if you're eating lunch in a common area and you're there with a bunch of coworkers, and one of the things that they do on their lunch break is they really engage in a lot of workplace gossip. And if this is something that you don't really want to be a part of, whether it's energetically you don't want to be a part of it, you don't want to be associated with it, here's where you can change your behavior. You can go and eat somewhere else. You can stay on site. You can go off site. You can maybe just go to another table where it's quieter. And if you don't want to go to the extreme where it's like you don't want to necessarily isolate yourself. So if you're finding that, again, using this example, that there are other people, coworkers that you really enjoy and you really like, and they don't want to be a part of that either. So maybe that is something you guys, have your lunch together. Maybe you go for a walk or maybe you go sit outside, something like that. Okay, another example, schedule vacations and or staycations. I think there's this idea, I know people always ask me this. They say, "Oh my gosh, you're off for the week. Where are you going?" And 9 times out of 10, I'm not going anywhere. And it's I and I think all of us, we probably ebb and flow in terms of our adherence to this, but it's about scheduling that time away from the workplace. And again, I think we talked about in our full episode, this is a really good indicator to know if burnout's there, because if you are able to walk away from the situation for a period of time and feel a lot better, that is some good information right there that, okay, that might be the source of the burnout. So, I try to make a point, and again, I'm not perfect, but I try to take at least a week off every quarter or quarter and a half. And I can't always do it. I mean, it's also based on my client load and what's going on with them. But if I do see the opportunity for a timeout, I certainly take it. Okay, the next one. I would be open with your communication. So this can be hard, right? But if you are open and honest in the workplace and to the best of your ability. And I say that because I know that sometimes work environments can have their own culture and dynamics, but keep the dialogue open and let people know where you stand. You don't certainly want to be perceived as the difficult person if you're always saying no. But if someone understands why you're saying no to certain things and maybe why you're saying yes to others, that is good information. And that brings me to the other one of practice saying no. So, no is a complete sentence, and no is a tough one for people, especially in the workplace, especially if you are kind of climbing, your career ladder and you're trying to set yourself up for down the road. Again, I think you don't have to say, and you shouldn't say no to everything, but it's picking and choosing your battles and knowing that it's okay to do so. Another one is be clear on what your role is and is not. So, one of the things that is my pet peeve, and I mean, I don't have to worry about this now, but if someone ever came to me and said, "Well, that's not my job," um, depending on the situation, that could be a tough one for me because if this is a one off and you're a team player, I'm really going to appreciate, like, thank you so much for stepping up and taking care of that. That was great. But if that's something I hear from you all the time and it is really part of your job, that's not gonna bode well. And I think in the workplace, if you have an HR department, this is where it's helpful because your HR department can say, "Okay, this is what's in your job description." And of course, most every job description now, take this for a grain of salt because I literally haven't seen one in eons, but there was always this caveat that, other duties as required. Um, that so if someone said to you, "Okay, so, I want you to go and market this idea," and you're an accountant, you're not going to know what to do. And that's not a realistic expectation. And that's an example of where it's okay to say, yeah, no, that's not my role. Like that, why would you even ask me to do that? That doesn't make sense. So I think the last thing I want to throw out there too is make sure you have personal goals outside the workplace. And the reason I say this is because this lends itself to having, hopefully, that work life balance. And you don't want to have every thought, every thing on your to-do list to have to do with work. And you don't also want it to have to be, oh, I've got to go run grocery shopping and I've got to take care of this, that, and the other thing. You want to build some fun in there too, whether that's hobbies, spending time with people, things like that. The one thing I want to also mention is if you work from home. Now, I know during the pandemic, I mean, that was when I think most of us saw the shift from the workplace to home. And I know for me, one of the things that was really important was to have a designated workspace. And I think it's important to leave and enter that space for its purpose. So in my home office, I don't go in and hang out in there. Uh, I go in there to work. And if I'm not working, I'm generally not in there. And part of, I think, one of the things that's important to remember about working from home is it's important to stay connected to the people you work with in a healthy way. So if possible, and this might not be possible to get together because you might be spread out in terms of hours or multiple hours. So, do you take like a virtual coffee break or lunch break together? If you are close by, schedule time to get out. And again, just even if you're meeting up for, 15 minutes or a quick coffee. So I think setting boundaries for yourself around work not only helps to prevent burnout, but your families and friends are going to thank you for it. You're going to be more present with them. You're going to be more relaxed. You're going to be healthier overall. So I do think it's something to, if you're feeling that you've got some burnout going on or you're leading up to it, do some self-inquiry, do a quick assessment and see where you're at. I hope you found this episode helpful and enjoyable. And don't forget to tune in to our last full episode of the season, which is going to be coming out soon. And we are going to be talking about self-care. So as always, thank you for tuning in and take good care. If you want to share your thoughts or ideas with us, you can email us at therapyunpluggedpodcast@proton.me. Until next time, be sure to subscribe to Therapy Unplugged on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts.